He didn't wear a uniform, he didn't carry a plaque, just a faded tattoo on his wrist, and a silence that made people uncomfortable. Most folks walked past him like he was no one, until one day, a young Navy SEAL walked in, saw the ink, and everything stopped. What followed changed a diner, changed a town, and maybe, just maybe, will change the way you see quiet people forever. It started the way most slow Saturdays in Charleston do. Cool air brushing past shuttered windows, a sky caught between sleep and sunlight, and the smell of cornmeal and fried catfish drifting out from open diner doors. People came early here, regulars. Fishermen just back from dawn trawling, grandmas in church hats, old jazz buzzing soft from a speaker no one remembered installing. Inside the East Bay Eats diner, paint chipped, but proud, booths filled by 8 sharp. It was Veterans Appreciation Saturday. Half off for anyone with proof of service, flyers taped to the windows, a folded flag at the hostess stand, and near the front window the same man sat exactly where he always did. He didn't wear a name tag, no pins, no camo hat with a unit logo, just a brown canvas coat stretched over lean shoulders, and beneath that coat, tucked quietly at his left wrist, was a faded tattoo, a dagger crossing an anchor. Worn, blurry, the kind of ink pressed into skin before tattoos became fashionable. The kind they did in barracks with stolen needles and steady hands. The kind that told a story without needing to say a word. His name was Marcus Lawson, but around here no one used it. Most didn't even ask. To them, he was just the quiet black man by the window. Older than most, alone, always alone. His skin the color of mahogany bark, darkened further by time and sun and silence. His left leg was a polished prosthetic, visible beneath the frayed hem of work jeans. He didn't limp. He calculated every step like he was still on hostile terrain. I'd worked that morning shift since high school. Name's LaToya Jenkins. Back then I was 17, learning to pour coffee without spilling it, trying to balance plates and dreams and Saturday shifts before cheer practice. But there was something about him I noticed. The way he held his cup with both hands, not like he was cold, but like he was holding on to something heavier than heat. I'd watch him sometimes when I thought no one was looking. He ordered the same thing every visit, scrambled eggs, no substitutions, white toast, black coffee, no cream, and silence, so much silence. He barely spoke, not even when thanked. He'd nod, or sometimes not at all. But he always paid in exact change and always left $1 behind, folded once, neat, precise. There was a stillness about him. Not sadness exactly. Not bitterness either. Just weight, like the weight people carry when they've lived through things no one asks about. Some folks speculated, said maybe he wasn't a real vet, said the tattoo looked drawn on, said a real soldier would have some kind of proof. But I never believed that. There was something in the way he sat, like a man who didn't need anyone to believe him, because he already knew what he'd done. He just didn't feel the need to say it out loud. On that particular Saturday, something felt different. There was a tension in the room I couldn't name. Maybe it was the way the windows fogged too fast, or how the chatter felt just a little too forced, or maybe it was the 4 men in matching golf jackets who had taken the center booth. Loud, confident, laughing a little too hard at their own stories. The kind of men who wore wealth like aftershave. I noticed one of them eye Marcus the moment he sat down, leaning back with a smirk that didn't need words to sting. Another followed his gaze, then the snickering started. I didn't catch the exact words at first, but I saw Marcus. He didn't flinch, didn't turn, didn't lift his eyes from his coffee, just tightened his grip slightly, and the tattoo on his wrist caught the morning light. That dagger, that anchor, that whisper from another world. A story in ink no one bothered to read. Not yet, but that would change, and when it did, this small town diner, this quiet corner booth, this forgotten man, would no longer be invisible, because sometimes the world doesn't wake up until someone salutes. It started with a glance, then a whisper, then the kind of laughter that's not really loud, but it cuts right through the middle of a peaceful morning. The man at the center booth leaned back like he owned the place. He had one of those faces that smiled with no warmth, like his teeth were trying to impress you. His friends all wore the same zip-up windbreakers, matching emblems stitched over their hearts. Charleston Yacht Club, a different kind of uniform. He elbowed the guy beside him, tilted, his chin toward Marcus's table. "That tattoo's a joke," he muttered. "Probably something he got at a state fair." They chuckled, not loud enough to draw attention from the kitchen, but loud enough that Marcus would hear, that I would hear. I was at the drink station pretending to stir sweet tea, my ears burning. "Who even sits alone like that on Veterans Day? Without an ID?" another man asked. "Bet he never even served." Or maybe, someone else said, half laughing, "he just wants the discount." That one landed hardest. I looked over at Marcus. He hadn't moved. Not a flicker, not even an eye twitch, just sat still. Both hands around that coffee mug like it might float away. There was no anger on his face. No sadness either. Just something harder to name. The kind of stillness that grows in places most people never go. The kind that knows how to survive disrespect. Because it's not the first time. Not by a long shot. I wanted to walk over, to say something, to them, to him. But my feet wouldn't move. I was still just a girl in a name tag, still learning the rules of don't get involved. And the manager, Carlos, he heard it too. He always heard everything. He had a clipboard tucked under one arm, like he was preparing for a health inspection that never came. Carlos was smooth, always polite, always calm. But I didn't trust the way. He smiled. He walked over to Marcus with a face full of customer service. One of those half-bows people do when they want to seem like they care, but really just want you gone. "Excuse me, sir," Carlos said, voice lowered but clear. "We've had a couple of quiet complaints." He looked over his shoulder at the center booth. "They say you're making some guests uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. That word hung in the air, like old grease smoke. I stopped pretending to wipe the counter. My chest tightened. Marcus didn't answer, didn't ask who complained, didn't demand to see a manager's manager. He just nodded once, slow, heavy, like a man who'd had this exact conversation before, too many times. He picked up his tray, balanced it with care, cane in one hand, breakfast in the other. No one offered to help. The men at the booth smirked. One raised his coffee mug as Marcus passed. "If he's a SEAL," the man said, voice high with mockery, "I must be the damn president." The others laughed. And that's when I saw it. A single tear. Just one. Rolling down Marcus's cheek, landing silently on the tile floor. It was the kind of tear that doesn't ask for attention, that doesn't scream, it just says, "I'm tired." And no one in that room said a word. Not Carlos, not the men at the table, not even me. Marcus pushed through the glass door into the cold. The wind outside hit him instantly. His coat fluttered slightly as he steadied himself on the patio. He chose the farthest seat, back corner, closest to the fence, where the wind wouldn't stop. But at least no one would stare. He set his tray down, adjusted his cane, and sat, one hand on his knee, the other on his plate of now cold eggs. Inside, life resumed. Coffee machines hissed, plates clinked, laughter returned. Just a little softer than before, but still smug, still sure. Like the story had already been written, and Marcus was just a footnote in it. Stayed behind the counter, still watching, still listening, still ashamed. He hadn't asked for a thing, not sympathy, not attention, not even warmth, just a meal and a moment. And somehow that had been too much. But what no one knew, not Carlos, not the club boys at the center booth, not even me at the time, was that this story wasn't over, because something was about to happen that would flip that entire diner inside out. Something that would silence those voices and shine a spotlight on a man who had never asked for one, but more than deserved it. The wind outside didn't care about respect. It bit through coat sleeves and stung the eyes, the kind of wind that came off the Atlantic and never said sorry. Marcus Lawson didn't flinch. He sat at the edge of the patio, far corner, facing nothing but a weathered wooden fence and the parking lot beyond. His tray rested on a table pocked with cigarette burns. Eggs now congealed, toast curled at the edges, coffee cooling by the second. He didn't eat, didn't move, just sat with one hand flat on the table, the other resting on his cane. The diners inside kept eating, kept laughing, a little more subdued maybe, but they had already forgotten they always did. I stood behind the counter, still frozen, wishing someone would say something, wishing I had, but I didn't, because I was 17, because I was told to stay out of conflict, because I thought silence was safer, but Marcus's silence wasn't safe. It was survival. That's a different kind of quiet, the kind that wraps around a man after years of being unseen, unheard, unwanted. There were moments, rare ones, when I saw his shoulders rise slightly, like he was trying to take a deeper breath, but even that looked hard. The prosthetic leg never sat quite right against the metal leg brace on the chair, and the wind kept teasing the napkin on his tray, lifting it just to let it fall again. He didn't chase it, didn't fix it, like maybe he thought the napkin deserved to leave too. I wiped the counter again, not because it was dirty, but because I needed something to do, something to keep my hands busy, while my heart pounded in shame. I'd seen Marcus come in every year. Same date, same booth, same order, same dollar tip, but I never really saw him. Not like this. Not until the laughter, not until the shame, not until I realized what it looked like when someone endured humiliation so quietly it felt normal. Inside, Carlos busied himself with the register. The men in the center booth ordered another round of mimosas, because of course they did. Privilege doesn't pause just because pain is present. And Marcus? He stared at the eggs like they were from another life. Maybe they reminded him of mess halls, of MREs in monsoon rain, or jungle heat, or sandstorms that buried everything except your heartbeat. Maybe that plate was a time machine, and he didn't want to go back, or couldn't. I wondered what kind of man it took to wear a symbol like that on his skin. That dagger. That anchor, faded now, but unmistakable. Not something you pick out of a catalog, not for fashion. That kind of ink is earned, not bought, not borrowed. And yet no one asked him. No one said thank you. Not one person in that diner walked outside to check on him, including me. And I hated that part the most. I remembered something my father once told me. He served in Iraq, took shrapnel in his shoulder that still ached when it rained. He said, "Sometimes the loudest pain is the one nobody hears." That stuck with me. Even more so now, because I could see Marcus's pain, but it was the kind most folks didn't want to look at, didn't want to feel responsible for. So they laughed, they moved on, and they let the man with the silent story sit alone. Again. That morning felt colder than most. Not because of the weather, but because of the weight in the air, a weight we all pretended not to feel. But it sat with us. It sat with me, and it sat with Marcus Lawson, veteran ghost, hero unclaimed. But that silence, that forgetting, it wasn't going to last. Because someone else was about to walk through that diner door. Someone who would see everything that others had missed. And when they did, nothing about that Saturday would ever be the same again. At 8:52 a.m., the bell over the diner door jingled. Not loud, but enough to make heads turn. A gust of wind followed it. Cool, sharp, like the kind that carries something unexpected. And in walked a man who didn't belong to breakfast. Not in the usual way. He was tall, broad-shouldered, mid to late 20s. Skin deep brown like old copper in sunlight. Tightly cropped hair, chin high. Posture locked with purpose. He wore a black navy jacket, not flashy, but every crease was perfect. And on his chest, subtle but unmistakable, was the trident. Seal. He didn't look around to greet anyone, didn't scan the menu. He walked in like a man who knew where he needed to be, even if he didn't yet know why. The room, once filled with forks clinking and small talk, dimmed its noise. Not silence, but quieter. Like the air thinned, and time took a half step back. I watched from behind the counter. He paused just past the hostess stand. His eyes swept the room once. Quick, tactical. Then they landed on the empty booth where Marcus had been sitting just minutes before. His gaze narrowed, brows furrowed, then shifted to the glass window, to the patio outside, to the silhouette of a man sitting alone, and then to the tattoo. It was small, barely visible from that angle, but the young man saw it, really saw it. And when he did, he stopped. Not like someone unsure, but like someone who just ran into a memory. His boots stayed planted on the linoleum. His chest rose once, held it, then exhaled slow. You could feel it, the knowing, the recognition. I watched his throat tighten, his jaw flex once, twice. Then his eyes, sharp and alert, moved with precision toward the door leading outside. He stepped forward, each stride deliberate, past the counter, past the register, past the center booth, where the 4 men in golf jackets had gone oddly quiet. One of them glanced up, froze. The SEAL didn't look at them, didn't need to. His presence alone shifted the gravity in that room. The bell above the door clanged again as he pushed it open. The wind caught the glass hard. It slammed shut behind him. Every person in the diner jumped. Coffee rippled in cups. No one spoke. Inside, I could see Carlos peering from behind the espresso machine, half hiding, half curious. The young SEAL now stood 2 feet from Marcus Lawson. The wind tugged gently at the hem of his jacket. His boots aligned perfectly, back straight, shoulders squared. He raised his hand in salute, clean, crisp, like he was addressing a general. "Sir," he said, his voice strong enough to cut through the glass. "Are you Marcus Lawson of SEAL Team Echo 3? Marcus didn't move at first. He blinked slowly, then turned his head. The recognition came not as a jolt, but as a slow unfolding. His eyes scanned the face in front of him, then lowered, to the insignia, to the trident, and then to the voice. A memory stirred behind those eyes, one that hadn't been called on in years. "G5, he murmured, barely audible. The SEAL nodded once. "My name is Ensign Jamal Williams," he said. "We studied your extractions in advanced ops training. We didn't know if you were real. Inside the diner, you could hear a fork drop. No one dared move, not even the men who'd laughed earlier. They sat paralyzed, held hostage by truth, because this wasn't just some old man with a story. This was confirmation, proof, history, alive. And wearing a faded tattoo in plain view, still carrying a mission long after everyone else went home." Marcus didn't speak right away. He studied the young man in front of him. The salute still held, the stance perfect. But it wasn't the posture that moved him. It was the eyes, steady, clear, familiar, like looking into a mirror that had skipped 50 years. The wind caught the edge of Marcus's coat, lifted it slightly, and there it was. The full tattoo, exposed now, no longer hiding. The anchor, the dagger, the myth made real. Jamal's hand trembled slightly as he lowered his salute. But his voice stayed firm. "G5, sir," he said again. "You're the one they tell us about. In ops school, in extraction simulations. You're the reason we learned to move without comms." Marcus's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Just a breath, heavy, uneven. He set his fork down, his fingers twitching slightly. Then finally, he nodded. Not out of pride, but out of recognition, out of memory. Jamal didn't sit. Not yet. He waited, still at attention. "Permission to join you, sir?" Marcus glanced at the empty seat across from him, then back at the young man, and with a small motion of his hand, he gestured. "Of course, son." Jamal sat, but even then his back stayed straight, his boots planted, his hands folded neatly on the table like he was in a briefing. Inside the diner, not a soul moved. Even Carlos stood frozen near the coffee machine. The 4 men at the center booth, suddenly very quiet, eyes locked downward. Their laughter from earlier, nowhere to be found. Just silence and shame. I stood behind the counter, heart pounding, because I knew that name. Marcus Lawson, Echo 3G5. I'd heard it before. Late nights in my living room, listening to my dad tell stories he called fiction, but I knew they weren't. Stories about the jungle, about firestorms, about a man who never raised his voice, but always got his team home. Dad never named him, but he'd draw the tattoo sometimes, show me how the anchor curved into the dagger just so. Only 8 ever wore that, he'd say. Only 1 made it back. And now that man, the legend from Whispered Stories, sat across from a Navy SEAL on a chilly Charleston patio with cold eggs and colder memories. And the world? The world had no idea. Not yet. But Jamal knew. He knew the weight of the name, the weight of the ink, the weight of what Marcus had carried, alone, for so long. He looked to the glass, to the people watching inside, and then he spoke again. But this time not to Marcus, this time to us. This man, he said, helped build our field protocols. He designed the drop sequence we still use. He taught us, without ever meeting us, how to survive. That tattoo, it wasn't given, it was earned. And if anyone in there feels uncomfortable being in the presence of a living legend. He paused, glanced toward the booth. Maybe they should be the ones eating outside. The silence that followed was deafening. One of the men at the booth shifted in his seat. Another cleared his throat. Uncomfortable now. Very. One stood up slowly, left his plate half finished. Didn't say a word. The second followed. The third took longer. But eventually only one remained, staring into his coffee like it might disappear. Marcus didn't speak. He never did much. But his lips pulled back, just slightly. The faintest line, not quite a smile, but something close. A bend in the armor. 50. Years of silence cracking just enough to let the warmth in. I don't remember deciding to move. My feet just did it. One minute I was behind the counter, the next I was out on the patio, holding a fresh pot of coffee. My apron fluttered in the wind, my heart thudding like a drum in my chest. Neither of them looked at me at first. Marcus was staring out toward the parking lot. Jamal was watching him, like he didn't want to interrupt the silence, like he understood that silence had its own kind of sacred. I reached their table quietly, refilled Marcus's cup without a word, then turned to Jamal. "Would you like some too?" He looked up. His voice dropped just a little. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you." He took the cup with both hands, like it was something sacred, like it meant more than just caffeine. I stood there for a second, didn't know what to say, didn't know what could be said, and then I remembered. Tucked deep in my apron pocket was something I hadn't shown anyone. Folded piece of paper, soft from years of folding. It was part of my father's old field journal. He'd given it to me for safekeeping, said, "One day you might understand this better than I ever could." Inside that paper was a photo. 2 men standing in jungle gear, grinning, covered in sweat and mud. One of them was my father. The other, he had that same dagger and anchor tattoo on his wrist. Same placement, same angle, same quiet strength. I didn't say anything. I just unfolded it, laid it gently on the table between them. Marcus froze. His hand hovered above the image like it might vanish if he touched it too quickly. Then he did. His fingers brushed the edge of the photograph, his eyes scanned it, his mouth parted, but no sound came. Then he looked at me for a long moment, and something shifted in his face. Recognition, shock, and something softer, almost like peace. "What was your father's name?" he asked, his voice barely above the breeze. "Frank Jenkins," I said. Marcus blinked, then leaned back slightly. Exhaled like he'd been holding that breath since the jungle. "He was a good man," Marcus said. "He saved us more than once." Nodded. "He used to say..." I swallowed, then looked him straight in the eye. "He used to say you were the reason he made it home." Marcus looked back down at the photo. A full minute passed, maybe 2. And then, he spoke again. "You have his eye." That was it, 4 words, but they carried everything. History, grief, memory, and something else too. Legacy. Jamal sat still, watching, listening, knowing this wasn't his moment to interrupt. And then, without asking, he reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, held it steady, and took a photo. Just one. No posing, no filters, just the moment as it was. An old man, a young seal, a folded photo, a waitress standing beside them, and a story quietly, blooming like morning sun on the edge of memory. That night, the image spread faster than wildfire in summer. It hit Facebook first, then X, then TikTok. Millions of shares, hundreds of comments, people asking, "Who is this man? Why haven't we heard of him? What's the story behind that tattoo?" By midnight, veterans were commenting, "I know that mark. That's not just any sailor. I remember hearing about a guy who walked 3 clicks through fire to drag his team out. I think this is him." And then someone added a caption, no hashtags needed, just 8 words. "Not all heroes wear medals. Some carry memory." The next morning, everything felt different. The sky looked the same. The diner still served shrimp and grits by 9 a.m., but the silence carried something else. Respect. Something had shifted. People talked about the picture, the one with the tattoo, the coffee, the folded photo, the girl in the apron. Me. By noon, the diner's phone was ringing off the hook. Local news wanted interviews. Veterans wanted names. Churches wanted to know how they could help. Carlos didn't know what to say. He dodged reporters, like they carried the plague, but I talked. I told them what I saw, what I felt, what I had almost stayed silent about. And when they asked me, "Who is Marcus Lawson?" I didn't give a title, or a rank, or a service record. I just said, "He's the kind of man who never asked for anything and deserves everything." That was enough. The rest unfolded like the pages of a book people forgot they were holding. Letters started arriving, first a trickle, then a wave. Handwritten notes, crayon drawings, photos printed from old. Ganner's veterans wrote, "I think I served near him. My father told me stories about G5. There was a man in Vietnam who carried 3 men on his back through fire. I think this is your Marcus." One letter simply said, "I never knew the name, but I never forgot the silence." Children sent drawings. One was of a man with a cane and a big smile. The caption read, "Thank you for being brave even when it was lonely." Marcus didn't know what to do with them. He brought in a stack one morning and set it on the counter. "Think you'll know what to do with these," he said. I did. I made copies, framed a few, posted one on the bulletin board with a note. "If you see Marcus, say thank you." The next Sunday, a woman left flowers on his patio table, no card, just a napkin with the words, "We see you now." 2 weeks later, City Hall called. They wanted him to speak at the Veterans Day ceremony. Said it would mean a lot if someone like him, someone who'd served quietly, would share a few words. I called Marcus that night, told him what they asked. He was quiet for a long time, then finally said, "If it helps someone feel remembered, I'll go." That Sunday, I watched from the back of the community auditorium. Marcus stood behind the podium. No uniform, no medals, just a pressed shirt, his prosthetic polished, the tattoo visible under a rolled sleeve. He looked out at the packed, didn't clear his throat, didn't adjust the mic, he just said, "I'm not a hero. I'm not a legend. I just did the right thing and tried to live quiet after. But if what I did helped someone, I'd do it again tomorrow." That was it. He stepped back, and the entire room stood up. Not because the speech was long, not because it was fancy, but because it was true. And truth has weight. After that, something changed in the town. People waved to Marcus on the street. Kids ran up to him outside the post office asking about his tattoo. Churches invited him not to preach, but to tell stories. The garage he'd run for 20 years, the one that barely scraped by, now had a waiting list. One morning, a group of high school students showed up, with paint buckets and ladders, said, "We're here to clean the place up, sir." Marcus grumbled, of course, but he let them. The next week, someone fixed the broken gate. Then came a new roof. Then came tools from 2 old Marines who said, "Figured you could use these." Marcus never asked for any of it, but he accepted it because deep down, I think he finally believed it, that someone saw him, that someone cared, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't carrying the memory alone. Some stories don't need explosions or medals or parades. Sometimes all it takes is a salute and the courage to recognize someone others chose to ignore. Marcus Lawson never asked for attention. He just carried the mission, silently, until the world was finally ready to listen. If this story made you feel something, sadness, anger, gratitude, then don't let it end here. Share it, because for every Marcus out there, there's someone watching, waiting, hoping to be seen, and sometimes all it takes is you.